Hello there and welcome to the Spread NESN's Football Picks podcast. I am NESN.com's Mike Cole, joined once again and as always by Ricky Doyle. Ricky, how are you? I don't know if you can hear it. There's not a lot of energy in my voice. I need to pick it up.
Yeah, definitely pick it up.
Yeah,
but, we'll get there. I have a feeling I'll say something that rubs you the wrong way, maybe even, or something happening outside of this room, maybe. We'll get some. Yep. There could be some noise that starts infiltrating the walls as we've had before. So I'm sure something will tick you
Life in general, we're just going to stumble across some sort of topic that's going to get me fired up.
You're a ticking time bomb over there.
So it's week 13 in the NFL. Is this the last week for buys? It might be. I feel like it has to be. But there are 6 teams on buys this week. Despite that fact, you and I will come together here to give our 3 best bets for the week, despite working with limited inventory.
Yeah.
So you
much more limited, especially relative to last week.
Correct.
We had 2 shows last week.
Correct.
Too.
Yes.
Now
we did not get paid double for those, did we? I didn't get paid very much at all last week because I went 4-11. You went 7-8. Looking back, again, this is always lamenting losses is stupid and dumb, but there's some bad stuff that happened last week that I was on the wrong side of, including no one wants to hear about this, my fantasy matchup, which I lost by 0.3 of a point. So I am life tilt to the fullest right now.
On the bright side, though, well, we peaked early. Let's just put it that way.
We did.
So if you stopped listening to us after the
literally the
episode,
first game of the entire week of our 2 episodes, yeah.
Because I like to think that we won Thanksgiving. We were we were all over that for the most part, all 3 games.
Yeah,
but especially the first one.
Did the Thursday night game go over?
I don't remember what it. I think it closed at 43 and it landed on 43. But I don't remember what we had. I don't know what we were working with for this show.
I don't either. Sorry. But
nevertheless, I mean, we were still kind of on it from a Niners standpoint. I think we were both leaning under.
Yep.
But really, it was the Packers-Lions one that I think you and I had a pretty good feel for.
Crushed it. Yeah.
Not to pat ourselves on the back.
No, and that pretty much went exactly. I was talking to our friend George earlier. He says, I don't know who saw that coming. I was like, well, you clearly didn't watch the spread this past week.
And I tend to like George, too.
I do, too.
I'm going to have to take that up with him.
I will say, too, not, again, lamenting losses. My 3-unit play last week on the Week 12 show was the under in the Jets-Dolphins game, 40.5. I would do that all over again. Who could have seen a pick 6 coming on a Hail Mary that just completely screwed me over there? So Tim Boyle did his part. He just did it too well to get that over. Other than that, taking the Patriots feels like a bad play on my part as well, but we both had the Patriots. Kind of a weird week, kind of all over the place. I think we'll get into some of the storyline stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Anything stand out to you? There was a lot of football spread out over a lot of time there.
So just to follow up on the Packers real quick.
Yeah, love to.
Are they going to make the playoffs?
So they are basically even money right now. Here's how I'm attacking this, because I am a sharp. Sure, right?
Wait till next week?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think they're going to lose this week to the Chiefs. They can go 4-2. I think if they go 4-2, according to the New York Times predictor, there's 77% chance at least, depending on who they beat and who they lose to get in the playoffs. I think you'd probably pencil in the Chiefs game as a loss. And then after that,
they can win out.
Yeah.
So Giants, Bucks, Panthers, Vikings, Bears.
Yep.
So you lose.
It's
this
right
week.
there in front of them.
It's 4-2, 5-1, very much on the table for them. And it feels different, right? Like,
yeah, I don't want to get too carried away.
Yeah, I don't want to. See, this is how. Well, I'm trying to pump you up after your lack of energy earlier. But no, like that game to me felt like the Jordan Love coming out party. Like they're onto something.
Yeah, they did a nice job. I think I was actually reading a Pro Football Focus story this morning. I think he had 37% of his passes were like perfect, whatever that means, target-wise. Accuracy's always been the knock on him. He came out and was putting balls in the windows he had no business putting them into. I think that 37% rate was double like his best game the entire season. It was by far the best game of his career, obviously. He looked comfortable within the offense, and it looked like they finally are getting back to what he had success with earlier in the season in terms of a lot of those crossing routes, a lot of those schemed up routes and things like that, working guys open, and him just delivering the ball to whoever he finds within those reads. I think their offensive line has gotten a lot better. Well, not better, but they've found a way to work around it. They've rotated guys on that offensive line. I think Matt LaFleur has actually done a really nice job too. I was close to being out on him, but a lot of it does come back to, like, can you figure out the offensive line and then go from there? Also, the defense has been sneaky good, which is wild considering I'd still probably throw Joe Barry off of, trying to think of a way to throw him off of something without killing him, because I don't want to kill him.
A 6-foot platform or something.
Or like a building into a vat of Jello that takes him forever to get out of.
Yeah, like one of those
mashed potatoes.
A trampoline park.
Yeah.
And
yeah, I don't want to, like, I don't wish ill on him.
Yeah,
but like, if you, like I said,
just
like,
to give it a little scare.
Like if I throw him into a vat of food, it's going to take him a while to get out. And we can finish the season without him.
Right.
But no, the defense has played better. The offense has played better. The schedule really softens up for them down the stretch. I'm excited. I think as a fan of the Packers, I'd much rather watch this team be in contention for a playoff spot than suck and try to improve their draft stock, because I just think they don't need a quarterback. And outside of that, you kind of just like, well, what's the point? I'd rather win. I like watching competitive football.
Yeah. Well, and just as important to the teams that are sitting ahead of them in the playoff race have much more difficult schedule. I mean, Minnesota's kind of whatever. They got to play Detroit twice. Obviously, have that head-to-head match.
They got some help Monday night from the Bears too, with the Bears winning.
Seattle's got Dallas, San Fran, Philly in a row. Like,
yes, it's very much
trending downward for them. So I don't know. That was one of my takeaways. That just watching that game, Green Bay felt like a playoff team.
I agree. It was one game. I think they've been trending up though.
Yeah.
So it's not a complete aberration. I don't think that's their ceiling. I think this week is a great test for them. Sunday night on prime time against a team that is kind of scuffling itself, the Chiefs. So that was the other one. So that's another game from this past week. The Chiefs go down 14-0. I'm like, that's an automatic cover for the Raiders. How did the Chiefs cover that game?
Yeah, well, I saw it coming from a mile away. So.
Yeah, of course.
But to your point about the rooting for winning football, that is not the case in this region of the country right now. I don't know if you want to get into that now, or maybe we can touch on that in the end.
Why don't we hold that for the end? Yeah, we'll get into our picks.
I think I don't really have any hair across your ass when it comes to that whole thing.
And we don't have any hijinks lined up.
That's true. I don't know. We don't have any cards. No show and tell this week. So
we'll do a quick Patriots rant.
A Festivus, if you will.
Sure.
Sure. But should we do our picks?
Yeah, let's get into it. Like I said, I did really, really bad last week. You did okay. Let's try to build off of your okayness, and I'll try to get back on track. I think the season's pretty much over for me in that regard, but that's fine. So, what's your 3-unit pick this week, week 13?
I'm looking at game of the year, game of the week, certainly. One of the, we got a NFC championship game rematch, potentially an NFC championship game preview. I'm taking the 49ers, laying 2.5 on the road in Philadelphia. These two teams feel like they're on a collision course in the NFC. Right now, though, San Fran feels like the more rested, healthier team. Eagles banged up really across the board. Lane Johnson missed Sunday, questionable for this week. Dallas Goedert might be back. I don't know. He missed the last 2 games. Zach Cunningham left Sunday. Fletcher Cox left Sunday. That was a long, late, hard-fought overtime game. Buffalo ran 92 offensive plays in that to Philadelphia's 65. Buffalo nearly a 14-minute advantage in terms of time of possession. I just feel like Philly right now, I mean, we've talked about this multiple times over the past few weeks about their just, the tightrope walk with them. Being outgained in 4 straight games. Since week 8, their defense showing serious cracks, 28th in EPA per play. Only Cincinnati has surrendered more yards per drive. Only Arizona and Washington have surrendered touchdowns at a higher rate. Philadelphia has allowed more plays per drive than any team in the NFL. So it almost feels like to me that defense is wearing down a bit.
Yep.
Whereas, San Fran, that bye came at the perfect time. Since then, second in EPA per play, basically going back to what they were early in the season from an offensive standpoint. So I just think, the rest, the health, you factor in sort of the first half numbers. San Fran, I mean, we've seen time and time again where they come out, they punch you in the mouth early, they get up, they don't take their foot off the gas. Philadelphia is sort of the antithesis of that, right? Like they come out, struggle a little bit. I think they've trailed at halftime in 4 straight games. So, if they come out and they sputter and they fall behind early, Like, I don't know. Is San Fran going to let him back in this game? I doubt it. So this being under a field goal, I got to think this gets up to a field goal, maybe over. So it's sitting at 2.5. I will take it right now. But yeah, I mean, it does. It feels like these two teams are going to meet again down the road. But for this week, I like San Francisco.
It is funny we talk about a team like the Packers, and it's like, well, they're coming along, and they might be in the playoffs. You just look at like the 49ers point differential this year. Plus 140.
Well, that's the thing, right? Like so,
it's just that is a completely different.
So all the enthusiasm you have for a team like the Packers, it's like it gets sapped a little bit when you start talking about them relative to the powerhouses of the NFC, which is, I mean, it's like that for a lot of teams in the NFL, right? Like there's a clear cut upper echelon, and then you kind of mess around in the middle for a little bit.
I tried to do a little quick digging, the Eagles, I was like, well, they must be great in the fourth quarter. They must be plus $1 million. I mean, that was quarter.
You want to talk about pulling a game out of your ass. That was another thing, though. It's like, how much of that is Philly taking it and Buffalo giving it away? Like,
yeah,
those are the stars are aligned perfectly for a game like that to unfold like that.
So
I don't think San Fran is as susceptible to falling apart towards the end of the game. Quite like.
No, so Philly is third in the league in second half point differential, but they are just +7 in the fourth quarter this year. Dallas, number 1 in the league, followed by San Francisco. So there you go. That same 49ers team, second in the league in second half point differential behind Buffalo, weirdly enough. So yeah, like the 49ers, you look at their record and it's 8-3, seems just fine, like destined for 13-4 or whatever. You're like, well, how, it feels like they should be. You forget the fact that they lost 2 weeks in a row, and like that just kind of is going to look like a blip on the radar.
2 weeks or 3 weeks?
Was it?
It might have been even 3 in a row. Might have been
3,
which is just like insanity, right? Like that's what I'm saying. That
how does that happen though? Was it just the injuries? Like it's an interesting thing to kind of look back on. I wasn't following them close enough to know.
Well, it feels like those are the games where they sort of got derailed a little bit, right?
Yeah,
like
Cleveland, Minnesota,
you get punched in the mouth early.
Cincinnati, yep.
The offense, once it gets out of sync, can it get back into sync?
Yeah.
It's very similar to Miami, I guess, in that regard. Like when everything's going well, there's a wow factor to it. You're like, holy crap! Like this team is like, how does anybody beat them? But then when these things start to go sideways a little bit, it's like, well, can they put it back together?
I do wonder then, like, does everything have to be right for it to be fully in sync then? Like, well, so that's why seen that for the last few years. They get injuries, and I mean, the championship game was a complete, that's an outlier last year. But Debo gets hurt, or Ayuk gets hurt, or somebody on the offensive line gets hurt, and all of a sudden it feels like completely throws it's a very fine-tuned machine, and if one little thing goes awry, it kind of throws off things in a way that probably doesn't affect other teams as much.
Yeah, that's why, I mean, looking at this matchup now, like, if these teams meet again down the road, I might have a different opinion.
Yeah.
It is just we'll see where things stand at that point because, like right now, to me, San Francisco feels like the clear-cut better team. And for what we've seen for the bulk of the season, certainly would back that up. But there's a long way to go.
Yep. All right, my 3-unit play might as well be a mea culpa for the Denver Broncos. I mean, I thought they were dead in the water. I don't think anybody else would blame me for that. I think
are they good? I don't.
So
I think I'm still a little out on them. That's why.
First thing in my notes is Denver actually good?
Yeah.
So they've got 5 straight wins.
Enlighten me.
If you take away, I love this in my notes too. If you take away the game where they gave up 70 and lost by 50, you take that out. They have a positive point differential. At FanDuel Sportsbook, they're now plus 146 to make the playoffs. I think they're right around even money to miss the playoffs. So it's more or less a coin flip. They've been good against good teams. Currently have a winning record against teams slated to make the playoffs. They have a 5-game winning streak over Green Bay, team we talked about, Kansas City, Super Bowl contender, Buffalo, Super Bowl contender at some point, Minnesota and Cleveland, 2 feisty teams. They've done pretty well. In this 5-game winning streak, they've got a plus 13 turnover margin. The defense, which was horrendous to start the season, we went through 5. They were 32nd in the NFL in EPA per play allowed by far since week 6. They're 8th in the NFL. They've got a real big test starting this week. They go on the road for 3 straight, including this one at Houston. But I am taking the Broncos with the points, 3.5 points on the road here against the Texans. It's more to do with the number. I like that I'm getting the half point there. Maybe I'm being a sucker for the hook. And just the fact that, Russell Wilson has been the 9th best quarterback by, Pro Football Focus rating over this winning streak. Thrown 7 touchdowns, no interceptions. He's only one of 2 starting quarterbacks without a pick in that stretch. His passer rating, 113.2, is 4th among starters. He's starting to look, maybe not MVP level Russell Wilson, but certainly one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the league. And for, Sean Payton, as much as I think he's a bozo and a goofus, as a person, he's still a pretty good head football coach, and he's got them playing the right way. So I think this pick for me is more about what I've seen from Denver recently and how they've performed recently than it is anything that happened to the Texans last week, losing to the Jaguars. Like you sometimes you lose divisional games by a field goal, and you've got a chance to tie it at the end, and you miss a field goal. Like, right. I'm not jumping off of what I've seen from the Texans. I just think this is a tough test for them.
It was a good win for Jacksonville.
It was.
Too.
So
finally a good one.
I think Houston, I guess, if you look at the nature of what they've been this year, or a team in this situation, is probably up and down. So maybe you want to be on the other side of this. I can totally see somebody being like, I'm not sold on Denver. I'm fading them. And I think Houston has a nice bounce back spot here. I just think 3.5 feels like a little bit too much for me. And I'm starting to kind of believe in the Broncos in terms of at least being feisty,
right.
At least being able to give teams a game.
It is kind of funny. As I pose that question, are they good? The thing with them, right? It's like, was talent ever really the issue? Like, they've had
not
talent.
On the offense, at least. Yeah,
I think that's what made their early season struggle so jarring. Was that like this team should be better than it is, but then they plummeted to such low depths that it's like now it's jarring to see them, bounce back in this way.
I couldn't believe it.
So it's like, but like you look across the roster and you're like, okay, this piece is there. It's not a team where you immediately like, they're just kind of catching lightning in a bottle. Like I kind of feel that way with like Minnesota, for instance, like the Joshua Dobbs thing. Like is it running its course there?
Right.
Like you get to a point with some of these teams where they go on a run and then their faults start to get exposed. Denver has some pieces that feel sustainable, particularly at the quarterback and head coach position.
Let's do a quick exercise here. I'm going to run through the top however many teams by DVOA and tell me whether they would rather have Russell Wilson as their quarterback than who they have.
Okay.
Baltimore?
No.
San Francisco? I guess money not an option here.
Yeah.
Maybe not. I could see them being like, Brock Purdy fits better for what we're trying
he does fit better. But that's a coin flip, right? Like, you can make an argument.
Kansas City?
No.
Dallas?
No.
Buffalo?
No.
Miami?
No.
Detroit?
Yeah, probably.
Jacksonville?
No.
Philly?
No.
Pittsburgh?
Yes.
Cleveland?
Yes.
Houston?
It is a quarterback, so yes. Houston, no.
Chargers?
No.
Colts?
Yeah.
And Vikings?
Well, yeah, unless we're talking Anthony Rader. Vikings, yeah.
Yeah, so, like, I guess the point of that is to say, like, if you put this version of Russell Wilson on some of these teams, they're going to be pretty good. I don't think, like, the Broncos are that far away from what we were just, a lot of those teams that don't have the quarterback. Like, again, you put Russell Wilson on Detroit, right, for as good as Goff is. Well, Goff's starting to do a little bit of a free, slide back, free fall, whatever you want to call it. Or like Minnesota, perfect team like that. I guess every team could have done this. It is what it is. This is an imperfect exercise, but he's playing better, and this team is starting to win.
It's funny you mentioned that Jared Goff cliff.
Yep.
2-unit pick.
Sure.
Lions. Laying 4 in New Orleans. That's where I'm going. This is Detroit's a team. They're showing cracks, obviously. Hence why we were so against them last week. But I'm not totally out. Like, I just think we've kind of hit a midseason malaise. Defensively is where sort of their issues have lied. I think this is a good get-right spot for them in that regard. New Orleans offense, I don't know what it's really going to look like going into this game. You had Chris Olave leave on Sunday. Rashid Shaheed left on Sunday. Michael Thomas already out. It's a team that struggles in the red zone anyways, 29th in red zone offense. So while Detroit's defense has been bad really since that Week 7 blowout loss to Baltimore, I do look at the schedule a little bit, and I'm like, well, that is Baltimore. You did have the Chargers mixed in there. Chicago with the returning Justin Fields. We mentioned how good Jordan Love was in that game. So I think this is a good matchup for Detroit to get back on track, both offensively and defensively. The thing with me, like New Orleans, they're kind of the definition of mediocre. And I think we saw that this past week against Atlanta. Atlanta running all over them. I think they had over 200 rushing yards. Pass defense been a little bit shaky. Marshawn Lattimore on the IR. They're not applying pressure at the rate they have in previous seasons. Cam Jordan looks 34. So that New Orleans defense, while it's been decent, just hasn't really been that carrying unit that maybe we thought it would be in that division. So, this is a relatively short number. And like I said, I think it's just a good spot for the Lions to sort of bounce back from their recent woes. Also, too, trends of your thing. Saints 0-4 against the spread at home. Lions 4-1 against the spread on the road. So.
I was going to say narrative storyline type of stuff really points to Detroit, too. It's like people are going to be down on them. They've had the longer rest with the Thursday game. Jared Goff, much better inside than he is outside. I was going to say
road game, but an indoor road game. Like, that's big.
Yep.
Saints, too, like, I think we've touched on this before, where I think sometimes that home field advantage gets a little overvalued because the talent just doesn't quite meet the perception of that team.
Not to mention the Lions travel as well as anybody else, especially right now. So I think there'd be a ton of Lions fans there too.
Not out on the Lions yet.
No, I'm getting closer though.
Yeah, I like, but they're a team. It's like, could they sneak their way into the NFC Championship? Like, they feel very live to do such a thing.
Maybe, but like, I guess the question for me is
torched in the NFC Championship.
Third, fourth quarter, down by 3, got to go down and at least tie the game. 3rd and 7, what does Jared Goff do? Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
that's where you start to lose me, I think. So we talked about teams that travel well. Teams are going to have a good, presence on the road. Another one here, Cleveland. I'm taking the Browns as 4-point underdogs. This is a classic plug your nose and just ignore the fact that
was where I was at with last week's game, Cleveland-Denver.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know what it was going to look like.
No.
And I didn't quite know how they were going to get there, and I ended up landing on taking Cleveland, which was ill-advised in hindsight.
Yeah, it wasn't great.
But I feel like we're at that point with Cleveland, right? It's like, since you don't know what you're getting from the quarterback position, it's...
Yeah, right.
You gotta rely on the defense.
So I'm getting 4 points here with the Browns at the Rams. This game's in Los Angeles. I'm guessing, I probably should look this up, Cleveland didn't even travel. Oh, that's a tough... Well, no, that would have been after Thanksgiving that they would have traveled. So I'm guessing they stayed out in the West, so yes, that helps. I look at this as more maybe a fate of LA than anything else. The Rams... Maybe this is just me listening to the Bill Simmons podcast this week. Starting to get a little bit of buzz about a potential playoff push here. Do you know who they've beat this year?
Beat the Cardinals.
Twice. In Seattle twice. In Indianapolis. I think they have 5 wins, right? I'm not mistaken in that. So I guess it still kind of looks good when they win, but again, you kind of have to look at who they've beaten, and it's just not great. The Browns have so many issues. The biggest being the quarterback. Although I will say it doesn't sound like Dorian Thompson-Robinson's going to play. The drop off to PJ Walker is not concerning me in the least bit there. I think those guys are pretty neutral. I think there's still enough talent, assuming Myles Garrett plays. He's got a shoulder injury. If he feels like he can play, he's going to play. I think they have enough talent defensively to just kind of muck this thing up and fluster the Rams. Cleveland has a top 5 pass rush win rate. I can never say win rate. It always comes to win rate. Win rate. The Rams pass pro is bottom third of the league. Until last week when they got run over by the Broncos, the Cleveland run defense has been pretty good. I think they can keep this thing within a field goal. Just completely slow everything down, get it ugly, and lean on the defense. And I think, too, you go back and look at last week, they had more first downs. They ran more plays than the Broncos did. They turned the ball over 3 times. That's big. The Rams don't force turnovers, or they haven't done it very much all season long. They've only forced 9 turnovers this season. Only the Titans and the Panthers, 2 teams that are not very good, have forced fewer. So, again, get me to 17-14 here or whatever, and I think we're good with Cleveland getting the 4 here at the Rams.
Rams are they're tricky. They're like, there's a part of me that kind of looks at them as like the Broncos of the NFC, where it's like I don't know whether to fully buy in when they're flying high and totally sell my stock when they hit rock bottom, because like there's clearly talent there, especially offensively. And like as I make that comparison, like I look and like the Rams 11th in offensive DVOA, Broncos 12th in offensive DVOA. Yeah. Both of them have issues defensively. They're in total DVOA, they're 20th and 22nd. So it feels like there's kind of similar. But again, like it just makes week to week figuring out what version shows up. Like I think the floor at this point is probably lower with the Rams.
Yes, I agree.
But it's like,
well, again,
good quarterback, good coach.
Strength of win or whatever. Like the fact that in this 5-game winning streak, the Broncos have beaten some really good teams, including Super Bowl contenders, where, like I said, all the Rams have beaten are 2 divisional teams that are pretty bad, and the Colts. So, not sold. Although the Colts, looking at this, and we'll get to the Colts in a little bit, they're 14th in DVOA.
Yeah, it's weird.
They're like the new Jags. The South can just get bent.
That was like the perfect middle of the road game this past week.
God,
Colts Bucks.
Yeah,
like that's just that's the type of game when we do our weekly picks column that I get to, and I'm like, I don't know. Like,
no, it's I was on another angle there, but anyway, what's your 1 unit play before we get to the Colts?
So you mentioned the crummy teams that the Rams are beating up on this year, one of them being the Cardinals. So naturally, I'm going to take the Cardinals.
Okay.
I'm going to take the 5.5 points that they're getting in Pittsburgh against the Steelers. This is mostly because I'm not ready to lay the 5.5 with Pittsburgh. Each of Pittsburgh's wins this year has been by 1 score, 7 points being the highest margin of victory, minus 23 point differential. Maybe they start to show some strides offensively since ditching Matt Canada, but still got a bottom tier special teams.
They did get a bump last week. The offense looked better.
It looked better. Is their first time they get over over 400 yards or something?
Yeah.
But still, I'm not at the point where I'm willing to lay 5.5. For me, like Arizona's they're gonna be a tough one every week too, where it's you have the big play potential with Kyler Murray back in the lineup that kind of makes them a live dog against weaker teams. So, do I necessarily think they're going to go out on the road and win this game? No. But this could turn into a classic, Steelers, like get to 20 points.
Yeah.
Just find a way to get to 20 points, and you win this game, and it turns out to be 20-16.
20-16 is exactly what I said.
So, it's kind of the types of games they've been playing all year. And this could be no different in that regard.
The Steelers, total net yard differential for the entire season, 7th worst. So whatever that is, they're 27th in the league. Arizona, one of the teams that is worse than them. But still, I mean, they're a team that is almost a lock for the playoffs at this point. And they're in the neighborhood of the Giants, Bengals, Broncos, Cardinals, Raiders, and Jets. So, and the Bucks. Yeah, I did the newsletter every week, the spread newsletter, and I did the Black Friday deals. Kind of looked at like numbers I thought were good for now, but weren't going to be around long. And the Steelers making the playoffs at like even money was one of the ones on my list, because for as many holes and problems that they have, the schedule on the way in starting this week is pretty easy. But yeah, it's a good point. The fact that they haven't won a game by more than a touchdown this year is staggering for how good that defense is, especially, or can be.
I'm looking at their losses. So they have 4 of them this year.
Yeah.
San Fran.
Pretty good.
Week 1.
Week 1, right. Yeah.
Lost 30-7.
That was not good.
Week 4.
Got everybody else to send.
They played Houston.
Okay.
Lost 30-6.
Not great.
Week 8. They played Jacksonville. Lost 20-10.
That's insane. They just get their asses whooped.
Week 11. They played Cleveland. They lost at 13-10.
Divisional against.
Yeah, that was the weird game. But yeah, for the most part, when they've gone up in competition, they've gotten their ass handed to them.
Sick.
So, fortunately for them, they don't have to worry about that this week.
No,
but still, I like taking the points with Arizona.
Yeah, it feels like it's just gonna be tight every week. So,
also good news for them, they got the Patriots coming to town next week. So
Thursday night game too.
Yeah,
be delightful. Can't wait for that. All right, my 1 unit play. Talked about the Colts. I've got them in this one. I'm not taking a side. I'm taking the under in their game with the Titans.
Thank God. You need a total here.
Yeah, total set at 43 right now. I'm going to go under that. 4 of the last 5 meetings between these two teams have gone under 43, including the last 3. Tennessee, bad offense, awful red zone, elite red zone defense. Indy, their defense is pretty good. 11th in DVOA, 13th in EPA, 14th yard per play allowed, 11th in takeaways. Both teams in the bottom third of the league in 3-and-out percentage, and the bottom third of the league in first and second down success rate. Jonathan Taylor has a thumb injury. Tennessee, they get after the passer. They're 7th in pass rush win rate this season. Indy, 26th in pass blocking. That pretty much sums it up. I just think this is, you're on the other side of 42, which feels advantageous as a key number. I don't know. Like, this feels like a game that's going to play in the mid-30s.
Sure.
So there's not a whole lot else to add there. Unless there's a defensive touchdown or a special teams touchdown, which burned me last week in an under.
I'll tell you what. I got to stop taking Carolina because offensively they can't do anything.
No.
Like, that was I loved that pick last week, and I'm getting 4 points against the Titans. And
the Titans had no business covering that against anybody other than Carolina.
Well, that's the thing too. But then it's one of those picks where I get midway through the first quarter, I see a little bit of the offense, and I'm like, what was I think?
Apparently David Tepper thinking the same thing about Frank Reich, firing the guy 11 games into the season despite picking the quarterback for him.
Not good.
No, it's a mess down there. So
he's too small.
So I was actually thinking
out on small.
This will kind of
this
will catapult us into our next discussion. If you're gonna take a quarterback who's 5'4",
it's insane.
You better have the best offensive line in the league. You know what I mean? So I don't know how good their offensive line is, but it has to be Philadelphia Eagles level. And I guess the Eagles are a good example, right? Like, Jalen Hurts isn't small, but he plays the game in a way that's going to get him killed, theoretically. They do a good job of making sure he doesn't take unneeded hits outside of when he's on the move. So, yeah, if you're going to go with a guy that size, I guess the problem with building a great offensive line in front of him is he's going to be a foot and a half shorter than all of them. Won't be able to see over him. So that's a problem.
But it's like, how many times do we need to see this with smaller quarterbacks where it's like, this doesn't look right? Like, it just, everything feels like there's so much effort involved. You know what I mean? Like, give me a guy who's 6'5" back there, just slinging it.
It's, it's been an issue for a lot of guys over the course of.
How tall is CJ Stroud?
6'3".
So, like, that's a good guess.
6'3".
He is 6'3". Well, so, like, that's my thing. Like, I watch him and I'm like, granted he's better, but size-wise, I'm like, I would have taken that guy.
Yeah.
It just feels right to lead an offense.
They went out of their way to trade up and take the guy who might stink and is very tiny.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. The Panthers, by the way, according to Pro Football Focus, going into week 12, going in last week, 31st by PFF's offensive line rank. So this brings me to our next point, talking about the draft.
That's a good segue right there.
So you look at teams that draft up top, and it's no guarantee that anything good is going to happen. And sometimes you take Bryce Young and you trade your entire draft, or you trade first-round picks. Like the Bears can go out and win a game on Monday night and feel good about themselves because they know the Panthers are probably going to be the number one pick, and that's going to Chicago. There's been this, I don't like it. I do not like it. As somebody who grew up in New England hating the Patriots, I have a very slanted view of everything. I hate the discourse that is going on among a lot of people right now, which is, I think it's a defense mechanism to just completely ignore the fact that this team is historically terrible. It's dysfunctional. It's ugly. It's borderline hopeless. And they're like saying, well, let's just lean into this because we'll have the number one pick. We'll go take, Caleb Williams or Drake May, and we'll be right back into this thing in 3 years, 2 years from now, because we'll have this. And it's just like, I hate the idea that, these people are just putting off their suffering. Like, that's their own issue. They've got to, reckon with it internally that this thing is not good. B, like, there's no guarantee that if you go to the bottom or the top of the draft, however you want to call it, that just drafting that quarterback is going to put you on the right route. Like, they are so broken. And you look at teams, the Patriots specifically, but if you look at teams, for the past however many years who draft quarterbacks up high, you're doing it because you suck. That's how you got there to begin with. And just getting that quarterback doesn't mean you won't suck the next year. Like, for as much as we've talked about the Jaguars over the course of the last 12 weeks or the last 2 years, like, yeah, they're getting there, but they play in a horrendous division and can't separate themselves from the pack in a way that is very meaningful. And they are, Trevor Lawrence was supposed to be God coming out of college, and he's been good. What does he have, one playoff win? And it took the Chargers, another team that drafted a quarterback up high who supposedly was God,
that's a
historically
Spider-Man
puking all over itself to get. So, like, this thing takes longer than people realize. And I think I'm starting to come down on the side of I'd rather go win games and try to build something that way and just have trust in your ability to draft and develop, that if you're picking 12th, you can still find a player who's going to help you sooner than later. Like, I think you need to build. I might be going at this the completely wrong way, but, like, maybe quarterback doesn't matter as much as we thought it did.
Right.
You don't want a bad one, but there are bigger issues around it. So, like, I put the emphasis on the coach, the system, the supporting cast more so. Like, Mac Jones is a perfect example. Guy who looked like a rookie of the year in his rookie season now looks like the worst quarterback in the NFL.
So I'm admittedly conflicted because I see what you're saying. And generally speaking, I think that the whole idea of, like, rooting for tanking is just, like, such a loser's mentality.
That's my problem with it too, right?
And, like, because to your point, there are no guarantees.
Lame. Yeah.
And we've seen plenty of examples where, a team, quote unquote, tanks, completely whiffs in the ensuing draft. And, like, sure, maybe they end up hitting somewhere down the road, but it doesn't happen for 6, 7, 8 years. Like, there's a prolonged stretch where you stink.
Yep.
And you can't say the tanking worked if it takes you 20 years of tanking to finally get there.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So, like, yeah, to your point, like, it's not going to be an overnight fix for the Patriots. The other part of me, though, as a Patriots fan, found myself wanting Chad Ryland to miss that kick against the Giants.
So, like,
but I think for me, it's more just like I want to be able to sink my teeth into them having, like, a top 3 pick and seeing where that goes. But I will fully acknowledge that they might be better off in the long run if they end up with, let's say, the 4th pick. Or let's say they get the 3rd pick and everybody wants Marvin Harrison Jr. and they trade down. They accumulate some assets. They draft a quarterback in the back half of the first round. They get an all-pro tackle. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, now you got multiple pieces that are coming together right now, as opposed to taking a risk on, a guy who might be a great wide receiver, but who's, let's face it, useless if nobody can throw him the football.
That would be the dumbest move.
So, like, Yeah, like I guess I want to see the Patriots get a top 3 pick. It's more so for the purposes of like our work.
Well, so like that's I actually thought
like I just want the interest of it.
Yeah, I thought of that today. I was like, well, actually, from a work standpoint, them having drafting one of those quarterbacks certainly helps our business.
But I don't think that if they land outside the top 3, that it's this death knell that everybody thinks it is. Because to your point, like those the top 3 picks aren't sure things either.
No, and we talk about. I think it's generally regarded that this quarterback class is very good. You go back 2021, I think we were having similar conversations. 2021, the top 3 picks in the entire NFL: Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance, Justin Fields at 11, Mac Jones at 15. Among those 5 quarterbacks, 2 Pro Bowls. One of them belongs to Trevor Lawrence. The other one belongs to Mac Jones, who again might be the worst quarterback in the NFL. Might be on a Chuck Knobloch level of broken, a Rick Ankiel level of broken. So, like, there's no sure thing.
So that's the other thing, too, right? Like, say you get one of the first 2 picks. You draft Caleb Williams or Drake May. Bring him in here. You have no talent around him. Like, I need to see what else they do this offseason, too. Who's to say that we're not talking about them next year the same way we're talking about Bryce Young?
Yep.
They get a little more size, but still, like if you throw a quarterback into a bad situation like that, I think it's irrational to expect that things are going to change overnight.
Yep.
Like for me, like when it comes to the Patriots, looking ahead to this offseason, them nailing the coaching search or whatever it is that they decide from a coaching standpoint is far more important than what comes of the draft or what that first round pick. Because I think that you have to build that. You have to restore some of what they lost from like a culture standpoint. And I know that like that kind of sounds ass backwards when you spend 4 or 5 years talking about Tom Brady versus Bill Belichick and how he ran laps around him upon leaving New England. But like, there's so much that played into that, right? Like that's an easy win to just say, Brady was more responsible for the dynasty. Like it's a once in a lifetime thing that happened. Looking forward, you need the coach in there. Like otherwise, like I said, you get a quarterback, throw him to the Wolves, and like he's probably gonna go the way of Mac Jones, right?
Yep. To that same point, or to the
they're so bereft of talent.
Continuation of that point. Look at I'm out in FanDuel Sportsbook right now. Top Super Bowl favorites right now. The Chiefs. All-time quarterback, but wasn't a top 3 guy.
And like 9th overall. Yeah, they traded up to get like good on them.
So good on them, right?
Making that an evaluation, but
Hall of Fame coach, guy who's had elite talent around him his entire career. San Francisco, Mr. Irrelevant, running that offense. A guy no one had even heard of going into the draft with maybe an offensive mastermind. Oodles of talent around him. The Eagles, they take Jalen Hurts, not a first-round guy. They've built around him with a lot of, again, best offensive line in the league, legitimate, supremely talented talent around him. The Ravens, Lamar Jackson, back half of the first round, a guy who also has talent around him. The Dolphins, now you start to get into, he was up, Tua was up high, but again, he sucked when they had, whatever else system before that. Cowboys, Dak Prescott's a 4th rounder, and then you get to the Jags, the Lions. So, I guess Jared Goff is a weird example in this whole thing where this guy who's drafted up high sucked, now is kind of good, but I think it's just, like I said, looking at the top of that betting board tells you, those teams more often than not aren't the ones, those are the teams that aren't drafting up top. Like they did not build their roster through a top 1 or 2 pick, and they didn't build their roster by continuously sucking. They've been, they've been good and been able to make the most of what they've been able to draft at 30 or 31.
So that is the biggest indictment on the Patriots' approach to this whole thing, the post-Tom Brady era, right? It's like they just weren't prepared to, well, I guess in theory, they should have been able to handle it. But
there's just a litany of missteps with roster construction and coaching staff. It's just drafting Cole Strange where they did. Or, if you want to go back to wasting a pick on N'Keal Harry. or hiring or giving the offensive reins over to Matt Patricia and Joe Judge, and signing Mike Gesicki or extending Devontae Parker or letting Jacoby Myers walk and bringing in Juju Smith-Schuster. It's just drafting a kicker who might not even be very good in the third or fourth round, whatever it was.
Right. And by
that's
virtue
where
of all
the
those
good
missteps,
teams are finding very good value.
Right. Well, I was going to say, by virtue of all of those missteps, that's when you stopped becoming the New England Patriots.
Yeah.
And that's when you started becoming one of these teams that's rooting for tanking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you had hit on some of those, you'd stayed in that, 7-10 type of range. I feel like there would have come a point where they graduated past that.
Yep.
Whether it's with Mac Jones or with some other quarterback they get in the back half of the first round, the second round, hell, even the third, fourth, fifth round. I think they would have got past that, but they so screwed themselves.
And they're so bad at it that even when they tried taking a quarterback later out, they took Bailey Zappi.
Yeah.
Who's
you're trading. Yeah, it's just they got to a point where they really started outsmarting themselves, trading up for a kicker and
They live in a neighborhood now with the Panthers, Cardinals, Commanders, and Giants, and you could maybe make the case that those teams are better positioned for the next 3 years than the Patriots are.
So,
which is wild.
So, to the initial point,
but I get it.
Look, is it better if you have the number 1 pick as opposed to the number 5 pick? Yeah, obviously. Yeah. You know what I mean? But I think it's a matter of expectations, right? You don't get the quarterback in this draft, and next year you come out and you make the playoffs. That's just, to me, that's unreasonable. And there's a very good chance that you get the quarterback and you still suck for 5-6 years if the quarterback ain't that guy.
Or it undersells the level of work, the amount of work that still needs to be done to build around that player. Sure. And that's what happens when you suck and you draft so poorly for so long and you make such bad roster decisions for so long and you don't have the quarterback. You have to basically be perfect moving forward, and that's easier said than done. But I get it, though. This is more of a straw man probably than anything, where it's what good does, when you're 2-8, what good does 3-8 do you as opposed to 2-9? So in the moment, I can see that.
But because this is such a long-term project and not something that's you're going to be able to solve overnight, that's why I'm saying they got to nail the coaching search in or who's buying the groceries.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because because at least you're coming up on an opportunity here where you'd have draft capital that you have not had in the past. And it's if you don't hit with these, then you're prolonging this whole thing for a little bit.
Well, and the other thing too is at least if you miss on the quarterback, if you have the number 2 pick, Caleb Williams goes number 1. You almost have to take Drake May. I get that. And maybe he sucks. But if you use your other top 100 picks in a way that is going to get you talent in here earlier than not, you can live with that. And I just don't think that they have whether it's Belichick or Groh or whoever, I don't think they have the people in there that can do that right now.
Yeah.
So, to
that's
your point,
the problem,
you need to hit that more so than anything else.
Because the worst thing that happens for them is they remain status quo, I guess.
Yep.
Belichick comes back. You have kind of a whatever draft. Maybe you take the quarterback. You end up with whatever you end up with. And then it just, maybe you win 5 or 6 games next year. And then it's are we going to fire Belichick? And it's no. This is the year. If you're going to rip the Band-Aid off and move away from him and start trending in a different direction, you got to bring in somebody that you have confidence is going to be able to put the pieces of the puzzle together, because it's all the pieces are scattered all over the place right now.
I agree.
And they don't fit.
No.
The pieces don't fit. They're all over the floor.
You got one piece.
The boxes underneath the coffee table. It all sucks right now.
One piece is the Eiffel Tower. Another piece is a Cape Cod sunset.
So I think that's why I do root for them to continue losing, though, is because looking at that roster, there are so few intriguing pieces.
It's so bad.
We've had this conversation with our Patriots guys that what name on the Patriots moves the needle?
Yeah.
Aside from Mac Jones for bad reasons.
It's all, yeah.
If
you're another team.
Christian Gonzalez maybe would have been that guy, but Judon maybe, but you lose both of them and you have just sapped of all your stuff.
As a fan of another team, there's nobody I look at on their roster, especially right now, and you're I would love that guy on our team. It's just maybe as a third stringer.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, yeah. It's drawing blood from a stone, continuing to talk about the Patriots, but it interests me at this point.
I mean, it's just fascinating because they continue to lower the bar.
Yeah.
Like just when you think that
level that didn't even seem comprehensible.
Things that, a situation can't get any worse. Like we were both on them last week because it was just so incomprehensible that they would come out of a bye.
Yeah.
And lose to a Tommy DeVito led.
We have our own a
team that we've dumped on the Giants all year.
I
know. And the Giants just beat the Patriots.
Tommy DeVito. That's that whole things are just getting smashed. Like that aura of, I mean, we had this conversation. Remember Andre used to bring this up every week. It's like Bill Belichick going against Sam Darnold. Yeah. And it's just like, he's going to whoop his ass and shove him in the locker. And I was like, Tommy DeVito, Gardner Minshew, it goes on and on. They've got a lot of bad losses. It's not just
Sam Howell.
Exactly.
Loss.
Yeah. At home.
Derek Carr, that Saints game, like that. I think that was the one for me where I was like, oh boy. That game, good. That didn't even sniff NFL red zone.
Yep.
Who had their own fire alarm issue this past week.
That's true.
You saw that. So it's good to know that that's not only affecting the spread, but Scott Hansen's got to deal with that as well.
We got through it this week, though. I was weary of stuff happening. I think we got through it.
Yeah, we did.
All right.
We bounced back strong. You brought your energy kicked up a notch.
Yeah, it was just.
What do you have in that tea?
We're getting the job done. So, anything else, Ricky?
No, I'm good.
All right, I'll see you next week. Thanks for joining us on the Spread, NESN's Football Picks podcast. We'll be back again next week. Goodbye.